Dave
Noonan.
What's up, man? Hey, we're here for the Academy Sports Rigs and Techniques at the CCA workbench.
Yes, you got it all in there.
Talking mangoes, man. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, well, you know, they're kind of, the mangrove snapper is kind of like the saltwater brim.
That's
right.
You
know, like you were saying, it's one of the first fish that you catch in saltwater, either that or a hardhead catfish.
Right.
Because you're using a shrimp on a dock somewhere, and they're ubiquitous. They're everywhere.
They're everywhere.
You know,
Boat ramps.
Yeah,
Everywhere.
they're a little snapper that, you know, but they're like, it's like a tale of two different fish though, because although they spend a lot of their young time inshore, once they get bigger, they get older, they move offshore. So it's a totally different thing. But when we're targeting those little inshore ones, what we're looking for is moving water. They really like places where the tide is moving through, like under bridges and whatnot, near inlets, any rock pile.
Love rock piles.
A sunken boat of any sort, anywhere, either on a flat or in a channel or offshore, is going to probably have several of them or a bunch on it. Mm-hmm. And what you do is you get up in a lot of those shallow areas, you can see them. You know, they move around enough and are active enough that you can usually see them, and they're readily identifiable. They're kind of a reddish brown color when they're little like that. They kind of lighten up as they get older and bigger, but they still have that same brownish coloration on them. They got that big tail and the snapper mouth, you know, with a lot of teeth in it.
They got some nasty teeth.
And they got some big eyeballs, and that's the main thing is they're very wary around leader material and stuff. Like we were saying, whenever you build a rig, you don't want to put a lot of swivels and beads and whatnot on it. You want to try to keep it as simple as possible. And that the fish finder rig that we were talking about, you know, knocker rig with just a big circle hook like this with a weight that goes all the way down on the hook. Right. You know, is a great thing for when you're fishing for the big ones offshore. This is an 80-pound rig here. It's pretty much like a grouper rig. And when you're going to be fishing for them offshore, you're going to want to be using something that might be able to catch that grouper or whatever that eats the same thing you're trying to catch the big mangrove snappers with. But like I said, that knocker rig is really good because it's very stealthy. Also, you can use a regular chicken rig. You know, you can get down and use a chicken rig on like 20-pound test fluorocarbon. Mm-hmm. If you're going to be fishing for them during the daytime and you're fishing for those little fellas, especially, you're going to want to use fluorocarbon. You probably want to use fluorocarbon all during the day if you're fishing for the big ones.
Definitely.
At nighttime, you can get away with using regular mono.
Right.
They just can't see it as well. They're not seeing it as well.
We talked about it a little bit before we came out, and you know, when we're catching them inshore, a lot of times you'll see them under a dock or on a piling, whatever it is, and you'll get a fish to bite, and then you can't get another one to bite.
They're smart. It seems like.
So what we do a lot of times is we'll take 10 or 15-pound fluorocarbon tied to a really little circle hook, kind of bury that hook into the shrimp or whatever bait you're using, and just free line it in there. Right. Make it look like it's just floating through, and that sometimes it makes a difference taking the weight off.
If you, again, just like when you're fishing for any fish that you're heavily chumming for, if you can get your bait to float with the chum, it's really great.
Make it look like the chum.
Make it look like the chum. Although a lot of times these snappers won't eat something until it's on the bottom. You know, a lot of times they'll get it when it's following, but a lot of times mangrove snappers, they like to eat stuff when it's on the bottom. I like to use these little hooks right here. They're called the no-brainer hook, and it's a circle hook with a weight on the shank. And if anything, if you put a half a shrimp on there, anything that eats it, he's going to get hooked. It's almost impossible not to hook him on that circle hook with the weight in the shank.
No-brainer is a great name for that rig.
Yeah, it really awesome. And it works good. But if you don't have those, just a regular jig head works fine. If you're catching good sized ones that are keeper size, you can catch small pilchards or small little cigar minnows and pin them to one of those. That's one of my favorite ways to catch a snapper, is to have a little live bait on a jig head.
The bigger ones, even in inshore, the bigger ones like that live bait.
They like to eat the live baits. And when you're using a big live bait offshore, maybe a good sized pinfish, a double snell rig is really good. You can hook a pinfish or something under the tail on the top, and that's that hanging hook down there. If he comes and eats that thing, one of those hooks is probably going to get him.
That looks fancy. I don't know if I can tie that.
It's not that hard. If I can tie it, you can tie it. And what you want to do is you're always, like I said with these fish, we want to try to keep all of our terminal tackle to a minimum, and so your weights is going to be just enough to get to the bottom. You don't want to use a whole lot. You can go ahead and use longer leaders if you're starting to not get bites. You know, use 20 feet, use 30 feet a
offshore
leader.
guys by us use 20, 30 foot
It's
leaders
kind of like
often.
mutton snapper fishing. You know, those guys who catch the mutton snappers, they use 60 foot a leader and then a grunt plug. And guess what? You catch a lot of mangoes when you're doing that.
That's right.
And if you use a grunt plug or something, again, this rig is great for a grunt plug. You know, just to free line it down in the shrimp, or I mean in the chum, when you got them all chummed up. It's a great way to do it. I like when we go back to the inshore fishing, my favorite thing to use is a white bucktail jig or a Sprite spoon. You know, a spoon with a little treble hook on the back, because they are short. You know, they're snappers, and they will snap at that back of that spoon. And also gotchas. And I like the silver and gold gotchas, the shiny ones, versus the glow in the darks or whatever, because the shiny ones look like little minnows. And I've caught tons and tons. You can see that one's been chewed. Yeah. Tons of little snappers. I take those to the inlets. Oh, they take those to the inlets, and if you get them all excited, they'll eat those things easily.
Bree even caught one on a topwater, she said the other day.
I did.
So
they're fun. They're fun.
I did.
They're great fish. And they're so good to eat.
Good stuff.
So good to eat.
Little Rapids topwater. Or just come to my house. We've got them all underneath our docks.
There
That's
you
all I
go.
seem to catch.